Sup guys, and welcome to another Voice of JST, which is the first in a very, very long time. I've legitimately been away for a long time. Yeah, and this time, the topic is, it's nowhere near as controversial or out there as my usual topics. In fact, I'm trying to bring things, I don't know, back to the ground, back to simplicity, I guess. Something that my audience will actually understand and not something I'm just gonna rant to you about. But basically, it's about fighting games. In fact, actually, to say it's about fighting games isn't really necessarily true because I'd even go as far to say it's about competitive games in general. Most competitive games have a habit of, I don't know, teaching you this on the fly. In fact, by just picking up the controller or whatever it is you use to play, keyboard and mouse, for example, you already figure it out. But I think fighting games in particular have this system where being able to fully grasp it, sometimes it's the very last thing people do, which sounds strange considering it's something you should probably know from the beginning. But basically, what I'm talking about is fundamentals. Now, I'm sure people mention the term fundamentals a lot, but I mean, we're not always given a clear distinction as to what it is. And I would go as far to say that fundamentals, quite simply, are just, and I know this sounds really strange and even somewhat patronizing, but fundamentals are just knowing the buttons. They're knowing what to press. You know, if you're on an Xbox 360 controller, it's what does A do? What does B do? Obviously, you can map buttons and change things around, so it's not exactly as simple as, you know, these buttons will always do this guaranteed. But the point is that, like, a fundamental, quite simply, is literally what do the buttons do, why, how does it work, how do you utilize them, etc. The reason I said that other games have a better, I don't know, a better way of teaching you these things is because on the surface, you need the fundamentals to survive. You know, if we're talking about a first-person shooter, we're talking about knowing what A does, which is usually jump, if we're talking about 360, you know, B to crouch, etc. If we're talking about something like an online MOBA, you need to know which what left click does, what right click does, what all your keys are binded to, etc. You know, like WASD or the directional pad if you use that. The point is that, like, the fundamentals of a competitive game are basically kind of like your master keys. They unlock all the doors, and people sometimes don't realize this. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because even from personal experience, I think to get cut right to the point, in fighting games, we sometimes get a bit lost, where we think that we know what we're supposed to be doing because we see fancy combos and, you know, fancy moves and technology, as we like to call it in the fighting game community. By technology, we mean techniques and useful things to know, that kind of thing. You know, so we think we have a good idea of how we're supposed to play a game, especially if it's a game that has, you know, combos or fancy super moves or the, you know, over-the-top flashy finishers. So we might go out of our way to learn that first, but we don't really take the time to actually, you know, have a firm grasp of the fundamentals first. And I think you're probably thinking to yourself, but what does that mean? Like, I know all the buttons, I press them all the time, I use them in matches. Well, I'm not going to be like Morpheus and say, you know, something really deep, but I think that just knowing when to press the buttons and how to press the buttons doesn't really mean you understand them. That sounds deeper than it meant to be, but the point is that, like, for example, in a fighting game, just knowing which button does what doesn't exactly mean that you know exactly when to use it and where to use it. If you know how to use it in a combo, or you know how to use it to set up, you know, some sort of move or some sort of maneuver, it doesn't necessarily mean you fully understand why that button's there and why it's functional. If we're talking about Street Fighter, characters have universal tools, and I'm not talking about special moves. I'm talking about the universal 6 buttons. For example, the jab or the light punch, the strong or the medium punch, the fierce and the heavy punch. And obviously there's the short or the light kick, the forward or the medium kick, and finally the roundhouse or the heavy kick. Each of these buttons is fundamentally different for every single character. Just like in Tekken, you know, left punch, right punch, left kick, right kick, or 1, 2, 3, 4. All of these buttons are very different for every single character, and I think it's easy to think that, okay, cool, I see these buttons, I know what they do, done. I think that just as I said, just seeing them and just thinking I know how they work functionally doesn't really mean you understand how they work dynamically. Once again, it's word salad. It's Morpheus talking. I'm gonna explain what I mean. What I mean is that like sometimes we don't really spend the time, and I understand because in a competitive world, especially competitive world with YouTube videos and forum posts, wiki hows, and all that, we instantly feel like we need to already be learning how to hit people. We're learning how to get the biggest combos and the biggest damage and figuring out the best strategies and stuff like that. When we haven't actually taken the time to basically just actually understand them. And now, to kind of bring this back to myself, the reason why I say that like this is really important is because for the longest time, like to use the example of Tekken, like I'd always played Tekken and I'd always learn combos pretty easily. When you pick up a Tekken game, you can press a few buttons and within a few minutes, not even hours, you probably figure out what everything does, figure out how to use it, that kind of thing. So for years I'd learned different Tekken combos and I'd learned how to block reasonably well, I guess. But even throughout the years, from Tekken 4 to Tekken 5, because I played Tekken 2 back in the day, but I played Tekken 4 and then Tekken 5 properly. And then finally Tekken 6, the one I got really competitive with. I'd even say I had some relative success with Tekken 6 online and offline. But it wasn't until Tag 2 when, I remember this was like last year or so, I was playing my flatmate. This was back in university. I was playing my flatmate in Tekken Tag Tournament 2. And he was using solo mode, and admittedly, solo mode it's a bit, wishy-washy, so I don't really want to, give my opinion on that necessarily. So yeah, we were playing, he was playing solo mode, I was playing both characters, but then again, I was forced to play solo mode simply because I wasn't a big fan of my characters dying so easily. And the thing is, he wasn't like a big Tekken aficionado, like he wasn't like super competitive, it's just he knew one or two things. And I remember that what ended up happening, what ended up frustrating me, is he was basically using just these one or two moves, and it was beating me quite badly, in fact. Because I basically, if we're talking about game knowledge, character knowledge, move knowledge, combo knowledge, etc., I beat him in that respect. However, I was getting really aggravated at the fact that I was simply losing to the very obvious and repetitive things he was doing, and I think that was frustrating to me because deep down I think I knew that what I was losing wasn't necessarily to high level play, quote unquote, or amazing tech, quote unquote. I wasn't losing to long combos or hype setups. I was losing to fundamentals. I was losing to that, his basic buttons either beating mine or just outsmarting me. And the fact that he was able to do this with like 4 or so moves, it sounds frustrating, but that was how it was going on. And it's not to say that I didn't understand. It's not like I couldn't fathom why he was possibly beating me with just the same moves over and over. That wasn't the point. It's not like at this point I was the kind of person to complain about someone's being cheap or someone's being unfair. Like, it wasn't that kind of situation where I couldn't understand how I was losing. It was just that I thought to myself, oh, I shouldn't be losing to this. I shouldn't be losing to just buttons. I shouldn't be losing to just him pressing the same things over and over. But I had to ask myself, should I be? Then I realized that in a way, as much as I understand Tekken, I didn't really take the time to, fully because to be fair, when you fight people online and when you fight low-level people, you can get away with just, doing the same things you do over and over, and not really understanding stuff like mix-ups, stuff like setup, stuff like counter hit. But fighting him, I, in a way, was forced to learn all these things, because if I couldn't block his simple 2 mix-ups, I would just die and lose so much health just from him doing that over and over. Having to guess constantly. I mean, to be honest, I hate guessing. Even though I want to talk about fundamentals, I hate guessing. The fact that I had to lose to those same buttons over and over, it forced me to quite literally learn what it was I was supposed to do to not only block, but to stay alive and to counter his moves. I had to learn which one of my buttons beats his, which one of my special moves will counter his, which one, what's the appropriate, thing to do. And basically, once you know these, then it's like it will help you out. Because I think another problem is that sometimes people get so content with learning combos and setups and amazing stuff that we don't even bother. We don't even bother to actually learn how to open people up, how to start the combos, how to hit people in the first place. We think that all we need to do, if we're talking about Street Fighter type or games or anime games, we need to get a jumping attack. Or with Tekken, we just need to get a launcher. It's not always that simple, and I think that because we don't know the fundamentals, we don't know what type of thing we should be doing to lead us into the big damage, to lead us into the long combos and the flashy stuff. We think that we just need to, move around the battlefield a little bit, then just touch them and hopefully we can get something off of it. When, as I said, it's not that simple. I mean, I think the biggest problem I had in every fighting game for the longest time is that I would be doing combos because they hurt and they look cool, but I wasn't really I didn't understand the dynamic and functional purpose of any of my buttons. And I think the importance of fundamentals is that you need to know what your character or characters buttons are supposed to do. Like, to give a very down-to-earth example, if we're talking about Street Fighter, let's just say, let's talk about your character's medium punch, for example. Yeah, okay, sure, it can lead into combos and it can do this, and that, but the thing is, you have to understand, like, I'm not saying, like, the thing is, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying go super deep into it and, look up frame data unless you want to. What I'm saying is that, like, if you look at your character's medium punch, you have to think about how it works, not just, into combos, but you have to think about how it works in general. You have to think, okay, so it's this fast, it's got this range, it does this much damage. What can I use it for? Can I use it for spacing? Can I use it for anti-air? Can I use it as a long-range poke? Can I use to lead to big damage? Is it a button that isn't as good as this button, for example? If I press, I don't know, standing medium kick instead of standing medium punch, does that work better? You know what I mean? Like, knowing those kind of things. It's weird that sometimes some people, and to an extent myself included, we learn these things last. We learn combos and setups and super moves and special stuff first before we even, I don't know, take the time to sit down and figure out stuff. And admittedly, it might just depend on the person. Some people, when they first pick up a game and start playing it with others, especially offline, you initially just learn, simple stuff like that simply by playing. Like, you press that one button or you do that one special move and you're like, I know what this does. I know how to, to utilize this. I can keep using this against my opponent because they can't block it, etc. But I feel like online culture, and I hate to say this, but like, because I'm kind of a victim of this as well, online culture really teaches us bad habits, and it's not even on purpose. Online culture has this, I don't know, terrible way of making us feel like flashiness above everything is important, that when you go online you only have to play fair characters and learn fair things and do flashy stuff or no one's going to respect you. And I think that's a very bad way of learning to play fighting games, because all you're really doing is learning to play flashy and thinking you understand the purpose of characters and their buttons. You think basically it's just a matter of like, oh, excitement, I want to do this. And mind you, that's not me criticizing playstyles, because when it comes down to it, a playstyle is completely down to the individual. But what I'm saying is that, like, online play would have us believe that what's more important is flashiness and fairness above actually learning to play a character for the sake of understanding their basic buttons and understanding how to use them completely. I think when you play offline, you figure out the simple stuff first, and you see how you stack up against your opponent, and you immediately go at it. I remember when I played Arcana Heart 3 for the first time. It wasn't actually online. I played it with my friend offline. I played it with So Real Josh, in fact. I played it with him, and we didn't know much about Arcana Heart. It was kind of like, this is our first time. This was we didn't really understand much about the system, and obviously we played BlazBlue and other anime games, but at the time we didn't fully get what we were supposed to do. But that didn't mean that we didn't like immediately get into it. In fact, what we did with Arcana Heart was we picked it up pretty quickly. We were able to convincingly figure out the basic, okay, what do these buttons do? What do these special moves do? What are our supers? Okay, cool. And based on off that alone, we were able to have fun because we understood the basics of the game. We understood what things did functionally, and we understood how to use them. And I feel like if I'd played that game online first, like many other games, I would have skipped straight to learning combos and learning cool things, and not really focusing on the simple stuff. And this is where I'm gonna kind of explain why the simple stuff is always so hard to come by. And it's because people don't like, they don't like boring play. They wanna. I'm not gonna insult anyone or say anything that's out of line or untoward, but admittedly, people, especially online players, they don't like watching fundamental play, stuff like footsie, stuff like anti-air, stuff like spacing, accurate zoning tools with punishes. They want to see the big stuff. They want to see the flashy stuff. They don't like the idea of somebody kind of just down backing and waiting for you to do something. They don't like the idea of sizing up your opponent and playing accordingly. Admittedly, like in the past, I would play fundamentals. I'd play very simply, and I'd be content with what little knowledge I have, and I still won off of those fundamentals. Nowadays, I get frustrated when I can't hit big combos, yet I forget that sometimes in a match, it's not the big combo that's going to save you. Well, it might if you drop it, but if you don't drop it, but it's actually just your solid play in general that's going to save you, and not some massive magical combo that takes off like 1,000,000,000 damage. It's like, I understand it's frustrating for people, but the thing is, you have to learn to tune that all out. You have to learn to focus on your own gameplay. You shouldn't be listening to other people to dictate how you should play a game. Because the thing is, you both bought the same game. They shouldn't tell you how to play, and you shouldn't get frustrated by what other people say, or like feel like you need their approval to play how you want. As long as you don't criticize other people. The point is that, like, if your character has got this very annoying standing heavy punch that does this, and that, does A, B, and C, well, keep using it, because obviously this is your character's tool. This character's tool is very good, it's very powerful, and you need to utilize it. I even go as far to say abuse it for the sake of, well, victory. If you don't care too much about winning, then that's fine, that's great. But the point is that, like, knowing that, say, this character's stand heavy punch, or this character's standing 1, or standing A, or whatever you want to call it based on your fighting game, has this property and it's really good, etc. And I think that playing offline competitively, either in casuals, in tournaments, or in arcades, it teaches you to, not have that kind of pride complex. It teaches you to be more, how do you say, straightforward, with thinking less about the flash, less about the over-the-top nature of things, and thinking more about, what, I wanna press this, and that. I'm gonna hit them this, and that, this way. And that's why, like, legitimately, it's really, really important to think about fundamentals above all else, because if we spend too much time worrying about how flashy we can be and who we can impress, we're not going to do something as simple as learn how to block mix-ups or learn which buttons beat other buttons, and then you're going to end up like, in my situation where I was getting frustrated by losing to the same buttons over and over simply because I guess hadn't, even to that point, like even in my literal years of playing Tekken, hadn't actually sat down to think about what Tekken buttons actually mean and what's going to happen if I incorrectly block them. It's sometimes very simple, and once or twice I've considered making like tutorials for this kind of thing. I'm not sure if people would watch them, because I mean there's so many other people out there who do who are more popular, have more outreach. But it's like, without getting lost in the terminology, but stuff like, what happens when a character is knocked down, what happens when a character is being juggled, what happens when a character is counter hit, etc. Like, these kind of things are learned along the way. In fact, I was also going to mention that pride is another big part of this, because I feel like another problem that I have personally, I wouldn't say people do, is that like I'm a bit traditional in the sense that I feel like I should learn things on my own, and I don't like the idea of learning things from others, because it feels like I didn't figure it out and it doesn't feel fulfilling for me. But I think fighting games aren't really the same as other games, even other competitive games, where figuring stuff out on your own is rewarding, because in fighting games, information is power. Knowing something and being able to apply it is good. I wouldn't say just copy pasting and looking up combos, but figuring out stuff that you didn't know is something that helps everybody grow better. So when you're all on the same page, you can compete to see who is the most efficient at performing the things that you all know. At first I felt like finding out something from someone else or finding out something I didn't know. It felt like looking up an FAQ for getting stuck in a puzzle game. But it's not really the same thing, because in a puzzle game, the emphasis is on you, a solo player, to figure out a solution to a problem. And whereas there is some problem solving involved with fighting games, it shouldn't be as simple as like, oh, you know, spend like, oh, I keep getting beat by this move. How do I beat this move? This move is so frustrating. Do nothing about it. Don't look it up. Keep getting bodied by it and just be like, why do I keep losing to this? Fighting games shouldn't be like that. Fighting games should be like, why do I keep losing to this? Okay, hit the lab, pick the characters, see what you're supposed to do about it, or talk to somebody, or look it up online, or ask your opponent about it. You never know, they might be like the generous type who might just tell you. That's the thing. It's like information, you know, fundamentals, understanding what you're supposed to do in any given situation. That's the key to really being able to, you know, to stay alive. And I think that stubbornness, especially on my part, has only really hurt me. Playing to impress people has also hurt me, and not learning fundamentals especially has really hurt me, I think. So basically, to wrap up what I'm saying, I think that a fundamental in a fighting game, in an FPS, in a MOBA, in any type of competitive sphere, I think that knowing what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, and how you're supposed to do it, are infinitely more important in the long run, I think, than just learning long combos. Because I think a long combo is nice, and it's flashy, and it's great, but I think that's only important when you can get the max damage. And I think it's bad when we focus less on how to play the game, and we care too much about how to play a character. You know what I'm saying? Like, we think that playing a character is playing the game, but playing a character is only one part of a much bigger, you know, more complex puzzle. Playing a character simply means that you can perform the moves a character does, but playing a game means that you can effectively understand the system's mechanics. And you shouldn't be ashamed to do it. Like, I don't know why our community, our gaming culture, and to be honest, it's all opinion, but our gaming culture has made a habit out of shaming, shaming just people trying to play different styles that don't apply to the same brainless, rushdown, non-stop. And it's funny because for as much as people say they don't want to see boring, down back spacing games, people get just as bored when they watch Zero May Cry rush down everyone to death. So it just goes to show you that, you know, pure rushdown isn't as exciting as people seem to think it is. I mean, I feel like sometimes people just want to see people trade blows repeatedly. I guess, you know, conflict is enjoyable, but the point is that we shouldn't feel shamed or embarrassed or even, you know, frustrated of doing what's necessary, because I think that, you know, if you're playing a match, and who cares if it's boring, who cares if it's long, who cares if it's annoying, if what it takes to beat your opponent is both of you trading standing heavy punches with each other for about 30 seconds, that's important. Because sure, you can have these long combos that you never get to do, but the important thing is that you understood how to play that matchup, you understood how to utilize the system mechanics, you understood the function and the dynamic of the character's button and when you're using it. If your character has a long range standing heavy punch, you know that it's going to hit this character from a certain part of the screen, and by using that, you're going to be a more effective player than someone who's just trying to autopilot to get the same combos over and over. So when they're in your face trying to rush you down, you know that, okay, he's just trying to get his combos, but if I press this and that button, I can beat him out and get my combos instead. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that the better, better yet, I'm not saying that the person who knows fundamentals will always win. That's wrong. What I'm saying is that knowing fundamentals is just as important as knowing any long flashy combo or any long ridiculous setup. And I think that learning all of these things as a whole is incredibly beneficial. It's incredibly important. And once you understand all these things, it's going to make you not only an effective player, but you're going to feel more satisfied as well. And I think it's good to let go of your pride. It's good to let go of your preconceptions and just try and play the game for what it is. So I hope that, I don't know, this talk, this rant has, you know, made some sense. It's sort of semi-advice, but it's also my own reflections on just the idea of fundamentals within games. I didn't want to go too much into terminology or anything FGC related that would alienate my audience. But the point is that remember that playing, playing a game in its entirety, understanding, the function of things is just as important as anything else. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. So yeah, this has been JST with another voice of JST. So I'll talk to you guys later.